3. We did skip chapter 2, which is fine, but we're going to talk about something that, I don't know, we might have mentioned in passing, but we're going to really talk about it quite a bit in this chapter. Okay, we're going to talk a lot about it, and that's called parallel lines. You've heard of those before, haven't you? Parallel lines. And they throw some other thing in there, and it's supposed to be like a little and symbol. Transversals. We'll talk about what a transversal is here in a second. All right, parallel lines and transversals. Well, first of all, let's talk about what a parallel line is. Let's do this. There's one line. I'm going to actually copy and paste it. All right, I can do that with this program. Copy and paste it. And if you look at this, if I took these two lines and kept them going forever and ever and ever, do you think they would ever intersect each other? Do you think they'd ever touch each other? No, they wouldn't. Okay, they'll never intersect each other. Now, that alone doesn't make them parallel lines. We'll talk about something here in a second. But if they're in the same plane, we talked about that in chapter 1, about things being in the same plane. Okay, if they're in the same plane, and we can consider these two to be in the same plane because they're both on this board, I guess, or whatever you want to call it, this virtual, board. If they're on the same plane, let's say you drew two lines that'll never touch each other and you drew them both on your piece of paper. All right, that's the same plane. That piece of paper would be the same plane. So if they're in the same plane and they don't intersect each other, then they are parallel lines. So let's write that down. Did you write that down? Okay, even though it sounded pretty important, didn't it? So you should have written that down. So what must be true about the two lines? The two lines must be what? In the same plane. So write that down. They must be in the same plane. And they must what? Do they intersect each other? Right. They never intersect. All right. So they got to be in the same plane and they never intersect. If those two things are true, what are those two lines then? Parallel lines. Notice how we spell it. It's two L's first, then one L. All right. P-A-R, that's the easy part. A, para, and then lel. Two L's and one L. Everybody got that? Okay, so let's spell it right, okay? Parallel. Two L's, one L. That's parallel lines. Now, when we have lines like this, we have a little way to show that they're parallel. If I just talked about this line and this line right here, let's call this line L and line M. You know how to designate a line with just one letter. If it's a lowercase letter, you can use one letter. All right, so if I called this line L and line M, if I said that they were parallel to each other, this is how we could show it on the picture. We draw like a little arrow, but we don't put it at the ends of the lines. We just put an arrow right in here like this. Everybody see that? Sometimes they make them a little thick in the book. It just depends. Sometimes they make them another color. I'm looking at page 171, and they make the parallel lines red, just like this, and they put a little arrow right there. Okay? So those would indicate that they're parallel lines. So what do we know about those two lines? We know that they're in the same plane if they're parallel, and we know that they'll never intersect each other if they're parallel. Everybody with me on that? Okay, so that's how we show it on the picture. How would we write it out? How would I say that line L is parallel to line M? Well, this is how we would do it. We put line L, and then here's the symbol for parallel. It's very simple. It's just two straight up and down lines. All right, so that means parallel. You know how we had different symbols before? We had a symbol for lines, we had a symbol for line segment, we had a symbol for ray, we had a symbol for angle. Remember all that stuff from the other chapter? We have a symbol for parallel. So this would be line L is parallel to line M. That's how we would say it. So we don't actually have to write the word out parallel when we talk about two lines. We would just do that little two-line symbol right there. All right? Make sense? It's pretty simple, isn't it? And it looks like parallel lines. Well, that one looks a little curved, but you get the idea. They should look like parallel lines, just straight up and down. Okay, that's how that symbol right there means parallel. You could say M is parallel to L. It doesn't make any difference. So M is parallel to L. It doesn't matter which order you put the lines in. Okay? You could have called this something else. You could have, let's say that this was AB, and this was CD. What's another thing you could call this besides L and M? AB, right? So let's write it. Line AB Now, even though I don't have arrows on the ends, it's still considered a line. So how do we draw, or how do we do the symbol for a line? Line over top with what? Little arrows on the end, right? 2 arrows on the end. Brianna? Now, doesn't make any difference what they, yeah, it's a good question. It doesn't matter which direction they face, okay? They could have faced this direction right here. It doesn't really make any difference. Deb?
So like the L will face this way and the M face that way.
Nah, they would never do that though. All right, they wouldn't have this arrow facing this way, this arrow facing this way. They would both be facing the same way, okay? Now, like in the book, they kind of, I think they draw their arrow a little bit different. I think they kind of make it a little thick like that. Does that make sense? Like, oh, almost looks like a little triangle in there if I could shade it in. And then what they do is this. They put the arrows on the end. Now, the 2 arrows on the end, does that mean that they're parallel? Not the ones on the end, but the ones inside here. It doesn't have to be right in the middle and between them or anything. It just has to be somewhere between, you know, that line. But that's how we would draw it in the book. So in the book, it looks like that arrow is kind of like a little triangle looking thing. I won't write it like this normally. I'll usually just put an arrow like in there. Does that make sense? Now, if you had 2 lines and they look like they were parallel, for instance, let's continue with this. I'll get to that in a second. So what's another way to write this? Instead of line L and line M, how else could I write it? Line AB is parallel to what? Line CD, right. And we put the line symbol over the AB and the CD. Now, I could have written this a couple different ways, couldn't I? I could have written it AB, or I could have written it what? BA. Does it really make any difference? Not on a line, it doesn't. Okay, and I could have written this DC instead of CD. I could have said that CD is parallel to AB. There's a lot of different ways I could have written this. Somehow I don't think that seating arrangement is going to work out right there. I could tell right off the bat. So get ready to move tomorrow, okay? All right. Didn't take long. That didn't take long, did it? All right, so here you go. AB is parallel. Line AB is parallel to line CD. Make sense? It's pretty easy, isn't it? Let's do something else. I was just thinking about this. Let's say that line and that line right there. Okay. So what can I say about these 2 lines? Let's call this XY. And, oh, I should have used different letters. I don't know, QR. All right. What could I say about those 2 lines? They're facing a different direction, but does that matter? No. So what can I say? I can say they're parallel to each other. Anybody want to disagree, or everybody okay with that?
We don't know for sure.
Say it, Mike. That's right. There's no arrows on here. So would you say, Summer? I liked how you said it. You don't know for sure. Okay, you don't know for sure if these 2 lines right there are parallel. What if I put an arrow here and here? No, because those arrows on the ends don't indicate being parallel or not, do they? They just indicate that they're lines, that they keep going. They keep going in opposite directions. So right now, I cannot say that those are parallel. Now they sure look like they're parallel, don't they? But you can't always go by what they look like. I mean, this might be off just by just a little slight different slant than this one right here, and eventually they may intersect. So I can't say right now, just looking at them, that they're parallel. That's one thing about geometry. You can't assume stuff without them telling you for sure what's going on there. So a lot of people look at this and say, oh yeah, they're parallel lines, but you don't know for sure unless they do what? Put a little arrows somewhere in between. Okay, again, it doesn't matter which direction that arrow's going. They always put them in the same direction. Okay, both of them going in the same direction, but they could have gone up the slant or down the slant. It doesn't make any difference. So now what can I say about those 2 lines? Now I can say that they're parallel to each other. So if they wrote in here those 2 arrows, then you could say that they're parallel. And how would you write that? How would you write that down? That's it. So XY, put the line symbol over top of it, right, is parallel to QR. Yeah, just like that. Make sense? All right, so we say that those lines are parallel. If the arrows are there, then you can say those 2 lines are parallel. Now, they may not have the arrows there, but they may have this stuff written right here. They might say that XY is parallel to QR. So even though the arrows aren't written, they tell you this way, don't they? They got to tell you some way. Either they put the arrows there, or they tell you that the two lines are parallel by this little symbol right here. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So I think that's... Well, let's talk about lines that don't intersect. What did we say here? Parallel lines are not just lines that don't intersect. When you're a little kid, you probably learned about parallel lines before today, I would imagine. What, didn't you? Yeah, you probably learned about parallel lines. But most of the time when you learned about parallel lines before you got to geometry, they usually just said, oh, parallel lines are lines that just never touch each other. They never intersect each other. Okay, when you're a little kid, they probably said that. And that's about all they said about them. But what did I say today? I said they have to be in the what? In the same plane. Now, what in the world does that mean? Well, what if you had two lines that were in different planes? All right, let's take a look at this thing. This is a rectangular pyramid. We talked about that because we found the surface area and the volume and all that kind of stuff. Okay, but what I want to do, let's label some points here. Let's make this a little darker since we're on the white. Let's make it this dark blue right here. We'll call this point A. We'll call this B, C, D. Call this one E and F. I might as well call them all. E, F, what? G, and H. There we go. Everybody with me so far? Now, this is a rectangular box, okay? So this right here, it's either a square or a rectangle, okay? So what do you think you should know about AC and BD right here? They are parallel to each other, okay? And they're equal to each other. We're talking about lines being parallel, okay? So AC and BD would be parallel to each other because they'll never intersect each other. Now, again, I told you this is a rectangular pyramid, all right? So we know on a rectangle, these sides will never touch, and these two sides will never touch, right? And if you go straight up and down, they'll never touch since it's a rectangular pyramid, all right? I said pyramid. It's not pyramid. It's a prism, not pyramid. So look, AC and BD will never touch each other, but they're also where? On the same what? Plane. If you look at this, you can imagine a box in front of you, couldn't you? And this side right here is one plane. So this ABCD or ABDC right here, that would be considered the same plane. AC and BD are in the same plane and they never touch each other. What are two more parallel lines on that same plane right there? You got the two up and down ones, AC and BD. What else is parallel? AB and CD. Do you see that? So AB and CD, they're on the same plane and they don't intersect each other. All right, so they would be considered parallel, wouldn't they? All right, so I could sit here and list a whole bunch of parallel lines, couldn't I? This is a G right here. What about GA and HB? They're on that top plane, aren't they, of that box? All right, so if you look at that box, do they ever intersect each other? No. Are they on the same plane? Are they on the same flat surface? Absolutely, they are on the same flat surface, so they must be parallel. What about this, though? What about AB and EC? Think about this. AB goes this way. EC goes this way. First of all, will they ever intersect each other? They will. If I continue this line straight out like this, will it ever hit this line down here? Think of a box. I mean, I could take the time, but we're running out of time to show you a box, okay? Will this line running across the top like this ever touch? If it keeps going straight, okay, we're saying it's not going to occur. Will AB ever touch EC? Probably not. No, it definitely won't. Let me get a box for you. Let me pause this. If I had a line right here on AB and a line on CB, or sorry, EC, would they intersect each other? No. Are they in the same plane? No, they're not in the same plane. They're in different planes. AB, look what plane it's in. It's in this front plane and it's in this top plane, isn't it? Look at EC. Which plane is that in? It's in the bottom plane and it's on this left side plane. Do you see it? Are any of those planes the same? Do they have any plane in common? Nope, they have no planes in common. So they're not on the same plane. Okay, so they're not in the same plane. All right, so that's one thing. And what's the other thing? They still what? Do not intersect, right? So they don't. I'll just don't intersect. All right, so parallel, they didn't intersect. So they had that in common, didn't they? But on parallel lines, they had to do what? They had to lie where? In the same plane. But skew lines, that's our word right here, S-K-E-W. Skew lines don't lie in the same plane, and they still don't intersect. They never will touch each other. Just like parallel lines, they'll never touch each other. But skew lines are in different planes. Parallel are in the same plane. Let's look at the room and look for planes. Look at the ceiling. The ceiling's a plane, isn't it? Okay, so what if I took a line in the ceiling and I took a line on the ground? Let's do this. Let's do this. Let's say that wall right there. Okay, you got the line that intersects the ceiling and the wall. You got that line, and you got the line that intersects the wall and the ground, the floor. Okay, are they parallel to each other or are they skew? The one right there. See where the lights are hanging right there, and then the ground on there. They're parallel because they lie on the same plane. Which plane do they have in common? The wall, right? The back wall. That's the same plane in common. You follow me? Now watch this. What about that same top line right there? The intersection of the ceiling and the wall, okay? And what about that corner right there? Okay, where the closet and that other wall is. What are they? Are they skew or do they intersect? Will they intersect each other?
Yes.
They will? This line right here. This line right here. This line.
Yes.
Okay, will they intersect that line along the ceiling and the wall?
Yes.
No, they'll never intersect each other, okay? But does that mean they're parallel? No, because they don't lie in the same plane, do they? They don't have the same plane in common, so they're not parallel. So what are they? They're what? They're skew. What about this? What about, again, that top line right there, in the wall and the ceiling, okay? And what about that corner line right there, okay? They intersect each other. So they're not parallel because they intersect, and they're not what? Skew, because they intersect each other. So if they intersect each other, they're not either one, are they? Make sense? Okay, that's easy enough. Let's do this. We got to move on. We have some words that we need to look at right here. That's basically today all we're going to talk about as far as parallel lines. What we're going to do now is I'm going to draw two lines that hopefully to you are a little bit, it's kind of obvious. I hate to say that because we don't want to say things that are obvious, but in this case I think we could say it's obvious. So Cleo, would you say what's going to happen to these two lines? Yeah, if I kept on going this way and I kept going this way, eventually those two would intersect each other. Wouldn't you agree? All right. So I think we're safe to say that they're not parallel. Watch this though. Look at this. This is a red line, and it goes and it intersects those two white lines right there. Everybody see that? So what was the title of this lesson? Parallel lines and what? So what do you think this red line is going to be called? Good call. It's called a transversal. Transversal, it transverses, it crosses over. You ever hear that word? You transverse something. Transverse means you're going across something. And that's what this is doing. It's going across those two lines. This is a transversal. It crosses two or more lines. Right now we're just going to talk about two lines. All right, but a transversal is a line that intersects two or more other lines. Everybody get that? It's pretty easy, isn't it? So that's a transversal right there. These two white lines, we don't know they're parallel, but we know they're lines. Now look at this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to label some angles in here because I've created a bunch of angles now, haven't I, with that transversal. Let's label them. Let's call that 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay? Everybody see that? You see which one angle 1 is? Between that red line and this white one right here. That's 1, 2, that's 3, that's 4. Let's come down here. We got 4 angles down here too, don't we? So let's call this 5, 6, 7, and 8. All right, we'll probably have to continue this tomorrow, but we'll get started on it today. There's a relationship between a lot of these angles. Was it? Okay, good. Well, it was the pre-SAT though, wasn't it? Wasn't the PSAT? You took it? So that didn't really count. So when you're ready to take the real SAT, it will count, and then you'll know this stuff, okay? All right, let's pay attention now. Everybody clear? You ready? No, you weren't ready. Let's look at this. Do you see how this has a group of 4 angles and a group of 4 angles down here? Look at this angle 1 right here. See angle 1? You got this group of 4. Which one looks like it's kind of in the same spot as angle 1 is down here? 5. Okay, so 1 and 5 kind of look like they're in the same spot, aren't they? What about 2? 2 and 6. What about 3? 3 and 7. What about 4? 4 and 8. Do you see the relationship between those angles? We have a name for that. Here's the name. They're called corresponding angles. So you're going to have to know the names of these things, because on the test and quiz, I'll give you something like this, and I'm going to say, name the relationship between angle 1 and 5. Or I'll say, name all the corresponding angles, or something like that. So these are called corresponding angles. I'll just do the little symbol for angles here. So let's list all our corresponding angles. Now, corresponding means they're the ones that match up with each other. Again, do you see this group of 4 and this group of 4? 1 and 5 are kind of like in the top left corner of that group. Do you see it? Angle 2 is, where do you think? In the top right-hand corner. 3 would be in the bottom left, and 7, right? And then 4 and 8 would be in the what? Bottom right. Do you see that? They correspond with each other. They match up with each other. Everybody see that? So let's list them. So angle 1 and angle 5, they're corresponding. And then you can list the rest, can't you? 2 and 6, 3 and 7, 4 and 8.
I had that for you tomorrow, Mr.
I didn't do enough today to give you the worksheet, so I'll give you the worksheet tomorrow. We'll finish it tomorrow.